Let's begin. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for this webinar. Is the skills-based work model here to stay? Now we've got a very exciting webinar planned for today. Before we get started, I've got three quick housekeeping things to cover. First one, you're being watched. This webinar is being recorded. So if you'd like to share that recording with your colleagues after the webinar today, you'll get a link to that recording tomorrow. Second of all, we will be having a Q&A session. So if you've got any questions for our panelists, we really encourage you to drop them in the Q&A section or in the chat. Either one, it doesn't matter. We'll get to them at the end of today's session. And last but not least, please get involved. We've got a bunch of polls today. We really encourage you guys to take part in those. Your responses are going to help us sort of tailor our discussion today. So please take the time to fill those in. We'd really like to hear your feedback. Okay, I would like to start off by introducing today's panelists. So I might start with you, TJ. So thanks very much for joining us today. Can you give us a bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is TJ Hoffman. I'm the COO of SIDME. We're a software and services business based in Houston, Texas. Our primary mission is to help education institutions, so schools and universities, develop a skills-based model for their staffs. So we work on helping transition teachers into that model and then also power that work through our platform throughout the world. Additionally, as a fully remote company, we have employees in 6 different time zones and do a lot of our work asynchronously. So we've been working on implementing the skills-based model with our own team, both with onboarding and also with performance management as we've grown over the last several years.
Awesome. Yeah, we're looking forward to diving into some of that experience today. Thank you for that. Matthew, can we go next to you? Can you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me on the panel today. Matthew Burr, I'm the owner of Burr Consulting, LLC. It's an HR consulting firm I founded in 2015, primarily located in upstate New York. I do spend time near Dallas, Texas, and McKinney, Texas as well, and in Florida. Really focused on helping a small and medium-sized organization for any HR needs, A to Z, basically. I kind of deal with it all, including labor unions, contract negotiations. So I've been in the human resource fields for just about 16 years at this point. Started out as an intern and then founded the company 7 years ago in October of 2015. Also, like TJ, I was a full-time professor up until last year. I retired, quote unquote, and I do adjunct work for 2 schools in upstate New York and then also a school in Texas. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for being here. And last but not least, Jacob, can you give us a few words about it?
Yes. So hello, my name is Jacob Kubrinsky. I'm a founder and a CEO at Devskiller. At Devskiller, we focus primarily on skills, on the skills assessment, management, and development. And we also right now help and focus on building and transforming our customers into the skill-based model. So yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Awesome. All righty. Thanks very much for that, guys. I thought before we get started, we would start with a quick definition because skills-based work model, skills-based, this is quite a buzzword that's been popping up in the last little while. So I thought I'd read out this definition quickly. It's going to kind of preface today's discussion. So skills-based organizations are the ones that place skills and human capabilities at the heart of talent strategies, creating a new operating model for work in the workforce. So hopefully today we're going to sort of get a little bit deeper into this concept and really answer the question, is the model here to stay? Interestingly, there's been quite a lot of publications in really quite recent months. Only this Deloitte publication where we sourced these numbers from only came out, I think, a month ago. And it's already quite evident that skills-based organizations are the way forward. In that publication, they found that skills-based organizations, 52% more innovative, 98% more likely to retain high performers, and 49% more efficient. So there's some early signs there that maybe this could be the future of the workforce. But hopefully today we can unpack that a little bit further. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and launch our first poll, basically just to get an idea of who we are talking to today. So here it is, launching poll. Panelists, I encourage you to vote as well. So question is, which best describes your organization? And there's four responses. We have no plans to transition to the skills-based model. We are planning our transition to the skills-based model. We're in the process of transitioning, or we are a fully fledged skills-based organization. So you've already undertaken the whole process. And there are already some responses coming through. I'm going to let that go for a few more seconds and share the results. Okay, a couple more. How are we looking? All right. I'm going to end. Oh, one more. Sorry, guys. I've got to end the poll now. Sharing the results now. We got votes across all four, but the winner this time was planning to transition to the skills-based model, which I think is an interesting group of people to be talking to. We also had no plans in the process and fully fledged as well. So it's good to see that we've got people from all areas here. So with that poll, I thought I might jump into our first question. Matthew, I'll point this one towards you. In your words, what is the skills-based work model?
Yeah, so it's an interesting model. I've kind of done some research on it as well. It looks like what you're going to do is kind of take a job description and pull it into pieces, right? You're going to look for people's subject matter expertise in a specific field, or even in what they're interested in, instead of the hierarchy jobs that we think of, HR manager, compliance manager, quality assurance, whatever it might be. And you're going to focus primarily on those skills and put those skills to use in your organization. So it's kind of like when we think about flattening an organization, you're almost going to take and flatten that job description and then really focus on the subject matter expertise with that individual or that professional. It kind of gives them opportunities to do some dynamic skill, things based on projects, whatever they might be interested in, more so than just the primarily, the job duties that we have, the essential functions of the job. So it's focused more so just on skills and abilities. And I think it gives opportunities for people to work outside of their specific jobs and get involved in areas that they are interested in, they might excel at as well.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, thank you very much, TJ. Maybe you can add on that yourself.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add, I think Matthew did an excellent job of defining it, is that it is a pretty transformative way of managing an organization. And so, as a leader, and as a person who's responsible for allocating human capital resources to different projects throughout the life cycle of a company, the skills-based model is a much more dynamic way of thinking about how your team functions, and it provides a lot of opportunities. I mean, I think especially for fast-growing organizations like SIBME, where we do kind of the business that we run 3 months from now will be a completely different business than the one that we're running today. Having a team that's very comfortable with a skills-based work model makes them more dynamic and more willing to take on new tasks and new challenges as they arise, rather than constantly having to say, okay, well, now we have this job description, we need to bring in someone who fits that job description. We are able to assess and look at our existing team and say, can this work be done by the people who are already here? And is there work being done by the people who are already here that no longer needs to be done as the organization evolves? So it's a great HR and training model for thinking about how you think about the learning life cycle of your team. But it's also a great management model because it gives you a much more dynamic and efficient way to think about workforce productivity and how your team functions with the needs of your company.
Yeah. I think both of you touched on interesting points there as well. Matthew talking from a talent acquisition perspective as well, and you, TJ, from a HR and people management perspective as well, because it really is an entire model organizationally. So yeah, thank you for those answers. I'll stay with you, with TJ. Maybe you can expand a little bit on your experience. You said earlier in your introduction that you're a skills-based organization at SIBME. So can you maybe talk us through how that looks at SIBME?
Yeah, so how it looks from day one is sometimes pretty scary for a new hire, because I mean, I'll use this experience. We just hired someone new on our marketing team 3 weeks ago, and they had come from a very large, pretty traditional organization, and were coming to work for us, and we're expecting their onboarding experience to be very formal, very linear, very, here's a sequence of steps, here's your job description, here's what you're going to do, and all that sort of stuff. And then she had her first meeting and was just kind of thrown a bunch of stuff and said, go figure out what you think you can do with this. So it's much more informal in terms of how people come to join an organization. That's not always true, but that's what we've found to work for us. We've tried different models, and what we found is you're much more likely to get a accurate assessment of someone's skills if you give them a lot of potential challenges that they can look at and kind of, let them drink from the fire hose a little bit, and then start to whittle down to what their real skills and capabilities are. It's a slower onboarding process. So Silvina, who just joined our team, is probably not going to really be ramped up into doing much until the beginning of the year, because she's spending so much time kind of digesting information and learning. But I am confident, because I've watched it happen with dozens of other employees, that once she's up and running, she's going to be much more knowledgeable about our organization, and she's going to be much more willing to take on tasks that are her own idea rather than just being told what to do. But the other thing that I'll mention about that is, I hate the expression hard skills versus soft skills. I like to think of all skills as discrete and definable. But there are skills, our dev team, for example, there are things that they need to do that are very accessible, and it's easy to kind of identify, can you or can't you do that at what skill level, and then provide them with support if they learn, and then also allocate them to different projects based on that. But when we're dealing with people for whom those discrete skills are less clearly defined, the method that we use to define those skills is much more complex and requires a lot of different factors. So we work really hard. That's sort of what we work hard on at Sydney, is trying to help our team and then also our clients define those really complex skills into discrete capabilities, and then assess them and sort of develop those skills throughout. So I think that the biggest challenge for an organization that, and I'm kind of skipping ahead, but the biggest challenge for an organization to think about as they're looking at those, implementing a skills-based model, is really thinking about the discrete skills that you need in your organization, and then thinking about the discrete skills of your organization, the team, the people, and starting to align those to one another so that you can fill in the gaps.
Yeah, really interesting. This discrete and definable, this is something you recognized along the way, or this was something you set out as your initial plan?
Yeah, so it's our mission as a company. We started with it. We're dealing with a workforce in teachers where a lot of those skills are kind of poorly defined, and so we began this work with our client base. We began this work thinking about, okay, what does a teacher do in a classroom, and how do you break that down into really definable skills that we can look at? But it's been sort of a mindset that we've been able to apply to our customer success teams, our marketing teams, our sales teams, so that we're actually not throwing them into some sort of pre-baked training model and saying, here's how to sell, do steps 1, 2, and 3, but really like thinking about what's the difference between Brian and Brittany, and how are their individual personalities and background informing the way that they show up to work, so that we can better support them to be more productive in their jobs.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. Cool. So maybe you could extend a little bit on your experience with the skills-based working model.
Yeah, so I believe that there is a difference between thinking about the skill-based organization and the skill-based work model, because building a skill-based organization is just we heard from TJ, it's a different story. But with the skills-based work model, I believe that everyone has some experience with that for one reason. Basically, when you start building a new team or a new company, then you always focus on the skill-based model. So imagine that right now you want to set up the new machine learning department in your organization. You basically start with hiring one people that needs to do everything. So this person is responsible for analyzing the data, building models, deploying models, maintaining models, performance tuning, tools, etc. So this one person needs to fulfill all of the jobs that are required in this area. And then when you are progress and when you professionalize, then you start hiring new people. And these new people, of course, have just part of this skill, this first person, but on a much higher level. So you hire a person that is an expert in building models. and probably have no clue about deploying them, maintaining, because that's the expertise of this person. And I believe that when you think about building the skills-based organization, you need to start with thinking, how would I build a new team, and then think about scaling this approach when you hire for skills, and you think about skills, not the roles, because when you have two people in a small data science team, you don't care about the roles. If it's a machine learning operations specialist or someone, it's just a person who needs to do the job. And with skills-based work model, you just need to scale it across the whole organization. So that's how I see that. And as TJ mentioned, to do it in the whole organization, it's hard, because it's even, if you want to build an open feedback culture that we try to do very hard at Dexter, it's pretty easy to build it in one team. But to spread this culture across the whole company, that's a totally different story. So that's how I see that. I believe that we all have an experience, but scaling this one is totally different thing. Like Agile. Having Agile in one team, no problem. Having Agile in the huge corporation, that's a totally different story.
Yeah. Thanks for the clarification there, for sure. Awesome. Okay, I'll move along. I've got a second poll for today, second of 3. So don't feel like you've got too much work to do, everybody, but I'm going to launch it now. It's going to appear on your screen. I'll read out the question. What do you see as the biggest benefit for transitioning to the skills-based model? Return of investment for learning and development budgets, employee retention, organizational restructuring, hiring flexibility, employee accountability. Keeping in mind as well, we're talking about skills-based model, but obviously with the intention to become a skills-based organization as well. So you can think of it from the bigger picture as well. And votes are coming through. I'm going to let it go for about 15 more seconds, just to let some more people vote. And then I'll share the results again. Wakey, everyone. There should be more. There we go. A couple more coming through. Okay. All right. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. We had a very clear winner this time. So 64% of you voted employee retention. We also got votes for organizational restructuring with 45%, hiring flexibility, and employee accountability with 27% apiece. So that is really interesting. I'm going to stop that. That should be off your screen now. And I'll stay with you, Jacob. Looking at the poll results from your perspective, what do you see as the single biggest benefit or the benefits of the skills-based model?
Yeah, so the first thing that is a little bit surprising for me in these poll results is that no one marked ROI, but everyone, a lot of people marked employee retention, and the employee retention is the biggest factor for the ROI improvement with this skills-based model. Because when we think about the retention and the rotation of the people, imagine that you have 20% rotation, and on average, the rotation of one person costs you an annual salary of this person. So having 20% rotation and having let's say $10 million spent every year on the salaries, it means that you're wasting $2 million every year because you are not using this, you are not working on your retention. So that's pretty surprising. But basically, I believe that for me, the approach and what you can get from the skill-based approach model is that when I think about the IT and software development, it said that there are two hardest things in software development. One is the cache invalidation, and the second one is naming things. And when we are talking about the job-based model, then we need to spend a lot of time in naming the positions. So we need to say, and going back to this, this data science department, we are not thinking about what skills are required, but we are thinking about how to categorize these skills into job roles and how to name these job roles. And these job roles continuously evolve. So we're saying, okay, you are not longer a data science specialist. Now you are an MLOps. And after the time you are not an MLOps, but you are machine learning, deployment pipeline specialist, whatever. With this cloud, a few years ago, there was a cloud engineer. Now there are 10 different positions or that. So basically for me, going into the skill-based model is about eliminating all of the waste with like naming things, restructuring, trying to like tag people with particular names. And we say, okay, so you will do 2 or 3 things right now because we lack people with particular skills. So your job role will be named like this, and people are more focused on like naming the jobs than doing the real job. So like eliminating this waste is like one of the most important thing for me. The second thing is that when we are focusing on the skills, it improves hugely in internal mobility. Because for me, internal mobility is about looking people in non-obvious places, because it's pretty common that we will say, okay, if you're looking for like a full stack developer, look for your backend developers and teach them like how to do front end. But it's less common to say, okay, if you're looking for a software tester, then maybe in your customer support department, there is a person who is like after hours studying or learning like SQL and something like this, and it will be a perfect match for the quality assurance position. Maybe if you're looking for data analyst, you can use the Scrum Master that perfectly well know your organization, know all of the data, know the processes, the KPIs, etc., and we will be a perfect person for this like data analyst approach. So yeah. For me, I mean, eliminating the waste and focusing on skills, which helps people to like do the job. Because saying, hey, you are right now the customer success or customer support specialist. What about becoming a quality automated something specialist? And it's no, it's too far from me. But focusing on the skills and saying, hey, we need a person who is capable of doing this and this and this. This requires these skills. You have 95% of the skills that we need. So we'll send you to the 2 or 3 trainings and you're good for the job on tomorrow. It's something that is not preventing people from like, reskilling or upskilling into different roles.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a stigma attached with certain like job titles, right? So when we just say this are the skills we need, and I mean, we have examples within DevSkiller ourselves. We have a lot of our own developers who've reskilled into other positions into all of our departments actually. So yeah, when you take away that job title, it does become a little less intimidating for sure. So awesome, thanks, Kuba. I was going to go to you, Matthew. Maybe you can speak on some of the benefits from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, he did a nice job kind of breaking that down. I mean, mine would also be eliminating silos in the organization. I think potentially increased productivity. I think there's yet to be determined. I think it's such a new model. We're going to see if that actually, comes to fruition. Probably more organizational agility as well. I think that was mentioned by TJ earlier in the webinar. But again, you're going to be able to pivot from potential one project to another based on knowledge, skills, and abilities. Employee retention obviously is the big one, I think, for most organizations, as we've seen a big increase in resignations during the Great Resignation, pre and post COVID at this point. Again, I think you've got opportunities to relook at succession planning in an organization as well, learning and development opportunities, and really focusing on what people are experts in. And I think there is opportunity to get away from some of those maybe de minimis tasks or the minimal things that people are just uninterested in or not interested in, and the administrative burden. And how do we make that, how do we make people's knowledge, skills, and abilities relevant to that agility and knocking down those silos? In my opinion, I think if we can knock those silos down in organizations, you're going to be doing, 98% of organizations can do across the world. Again, increased quality, increased productivity, all those things come to mind as we think about this type of model for an organization.
Yeah, for sure. It is obviously a relatively new model, but saying that, like, it has been around for some time. When you think about the agile approach and even the way that development teams work as well, I think it's just being more widely adopted as well. But that's certainly a good point there. So thank you, Matthew. TJ, I don't know if you wanted to add anything here, or can we move along? Have you got anything else you'd like to say? Good to go. Okay, awesome. All right, guys. So we will move along to our third and final poll, which I'm going to put up on the screen right now. And this one is touching on roadblocks, basically. So the question is, what is the biggest roadblock for transitioning to the skills-based work model? We've got 4 options this time: organizational buy-in, time to implementation, employee participation, and restructuring costs. I think we've kind of touched on a couple of these already, but hopefully we can unpack these a little bit further after we get these poll results through. And yeah, we'll give that a few more seconds because I can still see the votes coming through. At the moment, though, there is a rather clear winner, which I'll share with you guys in just a moment. Any more? No, it looks like that's it. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So this time we had a really resounding winner, which was organizational buy-in with 70%. We did have votes for time to implementation with 20% in employee participation as well. Interestingly, again, restructuring.
No one cares about the costs.
No one's caring about the costs in this time. So we must be, things must be looking good. So we did have another question planned here, but I thought maybe we could just comment on the poll here, TJ. So looking at that, like obviously organizational buy-in was the clear winner, but interestingly, again, the cost was left aside. So what are your thoughts on the poll there?
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit that I was the minority opinion here, and I chose employee participation. But I mean, I guess you could kind of define organizational buy-in and employee participation as two different.
Yeah, I guess the way we structured
coin,
organizational buy-in was meant to be from like the top down,
right? From the top down.
Yeah.
And I'll say that, you know, I mean, I do think that frequently when we work with organizations, the leadership can be a major factor in ensuring that that the team is participating in a skills-based work model. And you know, we'll see leaders who are totally on board but don't want to do anything about it. And I think that that's probably the biggest mistake that an organization can make, is to say to the executive leadership, hey, we wanted to make this transition into a skills-based model. And then the leadership says, yeah, great. Sounds like a great idea. I've read about it. I read one LinkedIn post about it, and I think it's going to be lots of fun. And then they never, ever do anything about it again. And again, I'll use a specific example from Sydney. You know, as our dev team has grown, you know, from a handful of developers to, you know, dozens of developers, we've seen that we were very engaged in the idea of building a skills-based model on that team, and helping them sort of be more agile and dynamic. And I'm not just saying capital A agile, but like legitimately agile in the way in which they built the product. And what we found was that while our leadership, our CTO, our CPO were all very on board with it, they thought it was a great idea. It was really the sort of cultural dynamics of working with a team that was typically very deferential and typically much more interested in doing exactly what they're told and not pushing back on the leadership. To have a really great skills-based organization, you have to have employees who are willing to go to their boss and say, we're not doing this right. And that is a thing that has taken us a couple of years really to embed in the culture of that team. And so, you know, why I said employee participation is the challenge is that there are just people who really want clarity and comfort in their job. And they lean on that job description, that job title, all of those sorts of touchstones of work as the clarity for their job. And so it is a real transition to get the whole organization, not just from the top down, but also from the bottom up, bought into that. And where we see this work really well is when it comes from the bottom up, that the leadership buys in, but they don't cram it in. And you really are working hard to check back in with your team and regularly reinforce sort of the skills and mindsets required to be skills-based in your work, so that people, before they just jump into work every morning, are really thinking about, okay, what needs to be done to meet the goals of our organization. We use OKRs as sort of the touchstone of that in how we manage the team. But you could use any sort of, you know, goal setting protocol. But then also, what am I doing every day? And it helps them set their priorities and helps them point out when maybe the formal structures of the organization aren't aligned to the required outcomes that the customer needs.
Yeah. I think it was a really interesting point there. You said that I think the best way to sum it up is to get things started, you need organizational buy-in from the top down, but really to keep it going and to get it to work is from the bottom up, right? Because if people aren't sort of participating and enjoying what they're doing as well, then it's just never going to work. So it was really interesting. I thought maybe I'd pass it over to you, Jacob. Did you have anything you'd like to add here on the poll results? Maybe you had.
I basically already commented that for me the surprise is that there is no focus on costs. For me, the organizational buy-in is also especially a buy-in from the people that are inside the organization. And when we are helping customers with implementing this model, we care about the employees the most, because the managers is the one thing. The board is the second thing, and the employees is the third thing. But these employees is there are many of them. So if you do something wrong here, then there is a problem, and every aspect of the implementation depends on the participation of the employees. So that's how I understand this buy-in. But I fully agree with TJ that that's the most important element. And if something won't work here, then you are not able to fix it on the board level.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you very much. So I thought maybe I'd come over to you, Matthew, and so looking at the poll, so this kind of ties in with what we looked at. And the question is basically talking about who are the key stakeholders when it comes to making a decision to transition to the skills-based model. Obviously, we talked about from the top down and the bottom up, but from your perspective, who are the key stakeholders here?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of jump on what they piggyback off what they said. Again, I think you've got to have your board, your leadership team. Obviously, has got to be completely bought into it, and really your employees at all levels or whatever organizational whatever department you're going to kind of implement and roll this out at. And again, I think there's one area I wanted to just hit on based on that poll question is. Some of the things I've run into in consulting is you can't turn it into a flavor of the month approach, right? And again, I think to TJ's point, this is the way we've always done it as an organizational killer, in my opinion. You do have to evolve and change, and sometimes changing is suffering as an organization. But at the same time, it is an opportunity to not make it a flavor of the month. And I've seen that many times when we've gone down this path of either learning-based organization or a new Lean Six Sigma approach. And it just seems to, after a couple of months, it just seems to die out. Non-supervisor driven workforce. Those are the things you got to be aware of and kind of continue to hit it and make sure you are moving that whole thing forward, because it's 100% communication, it's culture change, it's evolution in the organization. And if it's not driven really top down in the beginning, but I agree, it's got to be driven, bottom up as well. That is going to turn into a flavor of the month. So you've got to have buy-in, obviously with your HR department, your training and development team as well, your leadership team, your board, and then the employees. I mean, it should be a workforce-driven initiative. We want people to enjoy this. We want to provide them that flexibility and evolve that culture. And I think that, the sky's the limit if you can roll this out and make it an effective model for any organization at this point.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, thanks very much, everyone there for the comments and everyone's involvement in the polls as well. We don't have much left in terms of our questions for today, but I do also encourage you guys to, if you have any questions for our panelists, please drop them in the Q&A. We've got time to answer them. But yeah, I will move along basically. And Jacob, I might go to you. We've kind of touched on it just there with what Matthew said, but if you were to sort of kick off this process, there's a lot of factors to consider, but what would you consider to be the starting point to kick off the process to transition into the skills-based model?
Yeah, so the first thing is that, of course, you need a plan, right? And usually when we are preparing the plan, we are starting with the kickoff meeting with the stakeholders of this process, especially the people who have the accountable role. Or they are consulted to discuss for the most important elements of what they want to achieve and what's the level they want to implement. Because often when we talk about the skills-based model, we think about the strategic workforce planning, going for the whole company from top to bottom, etc. But this is not the only solution. Especially a lot of consulting companies, like IT services, etc. They're using this skill-based model more in the operational way. So they want to widen the scope of the projects they are doing. So they want to focus on the skills of their employees. And it's, I would say, more operational approach, tactical approach than the strategic approach. And that's, of course, totally different story, because it's not like a whole change management approach. It's more like implementing a tool that helps them to build the skills inventory and then think about developing people and growing people based on the skills. But it's not like a full-blown skills-based work model, because this skills-based work model, if we are talking about what was mentioned earlier by Matthew and by TJ, it's about the culture of the company and the approach of defining and hiring people. And this is, from my experience, more a change management process than like a regular HR stuff. So I would say that you need to ask this important question, if you want to do it as a full-blown project, or just use it as a tool to improve your daily work model, but without all of these huge benefits that you can get. Still, it improves the internal mobility, but it won't boost your productivity in a significant level. So I would say it's that, and then it's about aligning the understanding of what we're trying to do and building this change management plan for how we want to get this buy-in from the employees, how we want to change the company, if we want to do it as a revolution or we want to do it as an evolution. The evolutionary approach is more often, but it's not said that every single company should go with this evolutionary approach. Sometimes you need to do the hard reset and say, okay, let's remove everything, let's build it from scratch, and then it will work. So yeah, I would say that these two things. And if you're talking about the change management, you need to be very honest with you. If you have the right skills and the right resources internally to do that, or you need to get an external consultant who already been there, done that, and that's some person who will just repeat the successful process. Even if we see the companies just trying to build a competency or skills matrix, even if they're doing it in spreadsheet, there are many, many different mistakes that you can make. And these mistakes are usually no-go for the implementation of the process. So it's not that I will say, okay, today I will become a skill-based organization, because there is a lot of knowledge that you need to acquire to be able to even start the transformation model. So that's how I see that.
Awesome. Thank you very much. TJ, Matthew, I'm not sure if you have anything you want to add there, or should we move along?
Just one thing, I think, again, I agree with everything Jacob said. I think one thing that, part of what I envision, and I do a lot of change management as well, you've always got to put metrics behind everything as well, remeasuring how effective and successful we are with any type of program, especially something like this. Do we have the right metrics? Where do we see where we improved? Where do we need to continue to improve as well? I forgot to mention that earlier, but the metrics is a major piece for me as we look at evolving organizations.
Yeah. Right at the very beginning, kick off and map out KPIs and everything that we're trying to improve, right?
I just want to say that I fully agree with these metrics, because without the metrics, you often hear that from the companies or the HR managers, how it's right now. Hey, it's better. But how can you know it's better? I feel it by my heart. So it's not better. How you want to say that this process is going in the right direction. So yeah, I fully agree with Matthew.
Awesome. TJ, did you have something?
Yeah, I mean, I just say, the metrics are great, and it's one of the very first things that we do with our clients, and also we find that we're having to be pretty revisionist in the way in which we think about metrics throughout that change management process, because oftentimes when you start, you have these ideas about what success will look like, and then 30 days in, 60 days in, 2 years in, those metrics are no longer meaningful. And so you have to sort of redefine success throughout the process. I would just say, the factor that I would not have considered, when we started working on this 10 years ago, as opposed to now, is that it's a process that never goes away. You're never going to really be a skills-based organization, you are always becoming a skills-based organization, because it's something that as workforces develop and as organizations evolve, you're just constantly having to kind of rip everything to the ground and start over. And the reason why I bring that up is that it can be a pretty frustrating place to work if you're not bought into that idea. A lot of people want to have just some predictability in what they show up to at work every day, and that isn't for everyone. And I'll go back to my example of Silvina, who we just hired. One of the other people we interviewed for the job, the very first step in our interview was to really talk about what it means to come to work for our company. She was the candidate that we didn't hire was far and away the most qualified. I'm previewing the question that's in the Q&A.
in the Q&A. Yep.
Far and away the most qualified for the job, and would have been a great hire, but she would have been hugely unsuccessful working for SIBME because she wanted to know every day, specifically and exactly, what do I need to do to succeed at SIBME? And the answer to the question was going to be, well, I don't really know, because 2 days from now, it's going to be completely different from today. And so, you really do have to embed that mindset into everything from day one, so that you hire people who are comfortable doing that. And one of the things that we found, and I don't want to at all denigrate HR leaders or anything like that, because I am kind of one, but that, oftentimes one of the places that it is very difficult to make this change is within the HR organization itself, because it is a huge shift in the day-to-day work of what you do as HR professionals, to really think about how you're supporting a team of people and how you're dealing with their skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like skills are fluid, right? Like they're constantly changing. And if you're becoming a skills-based organization, you have to be able to adapt at every moment, basically. I think there was a publication by IBM, which we've referenced in some of our material at DevSkiller. We're focused on technical skills, and something like technical skills have perishability of something like 2.5 years, which is really nothing when you think about it, and probably even less for certain skills. So yeah, it is really interesting that you said that.
I like to think about, Jacob keeps bringing up the financial factor and all this sort of stuff. It is so easy to quantify the depreciation of a physical asset, right? When you're thinking about capital. But I love to say that human capital is the most depreciating asset, right? That you have to think about the fact that everyone, including yourself, is becoming obsolete every day, unless you're constantly tinkering and maintaining and improving your personal capital. And so that's just not the way the world has worked up until the last 30 years, and it's becoming a faster and faster reality for us.
Yeah, for sure. We talk about it all the time at DevSkiller, future ready workforce, because as you said, it is changing so rapidly. So yeah, awesome. Okay, I've got one last question here, and we will jump over to the Q&A. So I might point this towards you, Jacob. I'll start with you. So looking ahead, basically, so we've had a pretty interesting discussion here about, is the skills-based work model here to stay? It is relatively new, but there is certainly evidence that this is the way forward. But how do you perceive its importance moving forward, particularly considering the turbulence on the job market at the moment and everything coming with sort of hyperinflation, all of these sort of macroeconomic factors that we're looking at right now? How do you perceive the importance of the skills-based work model moving forward?
So the first thing is that if we are talking about the digital skill gap, so that's something that we mostly focus on at DevSkiller. It's already known that it's impossible to close it with just regular hiring. Even if we talk about the cloud-based cloud engineers, every single company I know want to hire cloud engineers. Some of them want to hire hundreds of them. So there are not as many candidates, even if you will run boot camps right now, which are we can discuss if it's a good or bad approach to do that. It's not possible to build so many candidates. So you need to think about building these talents inside your organization. what is even important here is that if you're talking about the companies that are like transforming into the cloud, it means that they're like, moving out from the on-premise infrastructure. So these are the companies that already have hundreds of network administration, system administrators, etc. And they of course, need to fire these people just to hire new version of these people. So it makes no sense. So for us, being able to reskill these people, building an effective reskilling or upskilling for some of them, PAPS is the only solution, and that's the only reasonable solution, especially that you already have the people with the valid culture, with the fit in your organization. They know your organization, they know the business, they know the structure, they know the the company, people, etc. So you just need to teach them the new skills. And there is some research, I don't remember the source, that is saying that basically almost half of the skills that we have today will be obsolete in 3 years. So we need to implement them. And the big problem of huge corporations is that they rarely teach people new things, because there are banks which are still using COBOL, right? And the question is why? Because they were not trying to evolve. They were trying, if it works, it works. Why should we change that? And they rely right now on Java that was, released in 2004 or something like this, and they are not able to change that. And unfortunately, a lot of people that they have are also skilled only in these technologies. So they are not used to continuous learning, because if I'm using from 2004 the same version of Java, why should I learn the new version if I'm not able to use it at the company? And right now, this company faces the situation when they are far behind the market. If we talk about the people and if we talk about the technology, etc., and they of course need to pay the huge technical debt for using this old version of Java and paying Oracle to maintain and fix security bugs in this one. But that's the totally different story. So yeah, I would say that it's important, and that's something that will change the companies, not only related to the skills, but also related to the business model, the use in terms of paying out the technical debt and using the modern tools. And of course, every single modern tool that is released to improve your work efficiency, and being able to implement the software today is far more effective than implementing software in the 90s, because the new stuff is much better. And not using that, it's basically generating a huge cost for your company that you are not seeing. So that's how I would sum up.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I might go to you next, Matthew. Did you have anything here you'd like to add looking forward, basically?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's one of those, it is newer, right? And we'll see how, I think it is here to stay. It's similar to the Sing model of learning organizations back in the 80s and 90s, when he implemented that. There's a nice book on that as well. But, again, there's been a lot of recent articles about it. Harvard has one out, Forbes, a couple other business, publishers have some information on skills based. So I think it is here to stay. I think that, the organizations that are on the front side of this, or the ones that are very progressive in implementing this, are going to be the ones that recruit and retain and grow talent in their organizations, as long as, as TJ mentioned, as long as they continue to evolve. You never really master it. You just got to continue to evolve for which direction your organization goes, and know that there really is no end point or no end game. It's just something that's continuous at this point. So yeah, I think it is going to be, it's probably here to stay at this point, but we'll see what happens over the next 5 to 10 to 20 years in the workplace. I think the metrics will shake out. Some of the studies will show how successful it is, but it is a great model to definitely take a look at for any organization.
Awesome. Matthew, maybe you could sign us off before we jump into the Q&A. Anything to add here? Oh, sorry, Matthew, TJ. Sorry, TJ, apologies.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll just say that I think that as someone who's spent a large part of his career in the education field, if I were in the business of education, I would be quaking in my boots, because what I really believe this job-based model, this learning in the flow of work idea is uncovering is the failure of most education institutions to prepare a workforce for the economy. And that, I mean, it's it's sort of my personal, hill I'm willing to die on, as someone who has, 3 advanced degrees and the student loan debt to go with it. I have maybe a little bit of a personal beef about all of this, but what I know is that when we are thinking about leadership of businesses, it is becoming more and more important for businesses to think it's my job to be in charge of my workforce's learning, and not something that I outsource to a university or a college or a high school or a trade program or something like that. Because this whole life cycle of human capital, where you spend the first 20 years of your life developing your human capital, and then you spend the next 50 years of your life, using it, is just not true. And I think what we see with the great resignation and the quiet quitting and the this and the that, all these sort of hot button, buzzwords that we use to describe the reality of a macroeconomic trend that will persist, which is churn. There will be, with globalization and the changing in jobs, there will be churn. It will be ever present. And the idea that someone's going to go to college for 20 years and then get a job and keep that same job at that same company for 50 years is gone. It's not going to happen. And, so we as leaders of organizations have got to be willing to adapt to that and say, again, to sort of hint at the question that's in the Q&A, I can't just look at somebody's CV and say, okay, well, they went to school at this place and they got this degree, so they're qualified for this job. Because that school and that degree probably is very obsolete in terms of the skills that they used to define qualification for this job. So you've got to adapt as an organization and recognize that you can't just fire and hire your way to success as an organization. You've got to look at what your people can do, and sometimes that's hard to find, but it's well worth finding, because someone who is invested in is going to be more loyal. And my favorite, I think it's a Dilbert cartoon, but my favorite quote is, an HR leader worried about investing a bunch of money in developing the skills of an employee, and say, well, what happens if we spend all of this money and we develop the skills and this employee leaves? And then the person they're talking to responds and says, well, what if we don't invest this money and the employee stays? You've got an employee who is not helping. They're not productive. That's not better. You've got to continuously invest in those people's abilities.
Yeah. If I can just piggyback on that shortly, is that what I also see, and when we talk to the book publishers, they are saying that almost no one anymore is reading the whole books. If we are talking about technical books, they are just reading the chapters that are required for them right now. So I need to acquire the skill. I read the chapter and I don't care about the rest because I'm not using it right now. So I don't want to learn something that I won't use, which makes sense. But that's something that is changing also this whole educational market. And universities is also a second factor of that. But I believe that even the trainings that they're delivering right now, they need to change to this model that we have right now. And thinking about people reading chapters is by acquiring just the skills they need, not learning everything they can just because they can, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, I really appreciate all of the answers there, guys. I mean, we've kind of circled around this question here in the Q&A, but I think it might be a good idea to address it directly. I'm not sure, TJ, you've touched on it a little bit here, and it's basically talking about how to present skills-based jobs on the CV with the classic job title. Do you have any advice here, or maybe it isn't necessarily in the job title itself, but more in the description of the role?
It's a fundamental restructuring of what a CV looks like. And, I do think that there are platforms out there and things that will continue to evolve to define those skills. There are micro credentials and badges and things that you can use to sort of demonstrate competency in different things. And I think that's still pretty early days in terms of the effectiveness and accuracy of those badges and micro credentials. But I think it's the best model for defining what a person can do and what they're interested in doing. One thing that I think would be very interested in, something that I have seen a couple of times on some younger people's resumes as I've been doing interviewing, is not just listing what you can do, but also listing what you want to do. And so, being able to demonstrate interest is, for me as a hiring manager, something that I'm very intrigued by, and that's kind of sets you apart. But like I said, using those sort of brands, being able to say, oh, this person went to an Ivy League school, or this person worked for a Fortune 500 company, so they're going to be great, is probably not the best model. And you really have to start thinking about other things that are maybe a little bit more hidden to demonstrate on the resume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I will also say that it's not like introducing a problem, it's just like exposing the problem. Because even right now, when we are thinking about the job roles in the different company, the same job role can mean totally something different. When we are helping companies to transform from this job-based model to the skills-based model, they're saying, okay, so we have this role, which is like a maintenance manager. We say, okay, we do have this role description from the previous workshops. That's how it looks. No, it's not this role. We treat it totally different. So that's the problem, that right now you are saying, okay, we need someone with this role, but you realize that this role description at different companies totally different, and the responsibilities of this person is different. So when I look at the CV, but I, to be honest, rarely look at the CV, because CV is it's not too much in common with the reality usually. So when I look at the CV, I read more about the responsibilities and the tasks that people were doing rather than the job role name, because sometimes you see so fancy job role names that it tells nothing, and someone has job title on 3 lines, and you realize that this person was responsible basically for buying coffee to the office, right? And taking a look at this one is the most important. And with skill-based model, it's not changing at all. You still have some tasks, you have responsibilities that you are doing. No one just cares about what's the name of the position that you are currently on.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Is there anything else left to add here, guys? Any more questions from anyone? We do have a couple of minutes left, so I can't see any more.
I just wanted to just jump in real quick. I mean, I agree with everything both TJ and Jacob said. And again, I think it's the way you structure interview questions as well. Are you asking the right questions during the interview to determine if that person's the right fit for your organization? Shouldn't base everything on taking 30 seconds to read a CV or a resume. I think it's also making sure you are asking the right questions and making sure they're asking you the right questions as well. I think that's going to determine that part of the process. Understanding you've got to screen resumes. I've been doing it for years, but again, the interview process will, I think, open up more discussion on what they've accomplished in that skills-based organization as well.
And I'll say, as a recruiter specifically, the number of candidates that have been brought to me from a recruiter, and I thought I could have found this candidate myself just by Googling this job description, we just worked, the people I ended up hiring for this position, we worked with a great recruiting firm that did not find me the candidates that I would have looked for. They were really looking for a completely different thing. And when they showed me the resume, I was like, who is it? I'm not, and to Jacob's point, the resume was a really bad indicator of who they were. It was in the interviews and talking to references that I was like, oh yeah, they're perfect for this job. So really being able to assess, a person's mindset and saying, listen, take a chance on this person is something that as a recruiter, I think is well worthwhile.
Yeah, I think to tie a bow on it, coming back to what was mentioned earlier, I think the whole approach to becoming a skills-based organization is going to be constantly adapting sort of every facet of everything, including talent acquisition, CV writing, all of these things. These are things that are probably going to be completely different to what we just discussed now in 6 months, a year's time. So I think you just got to keep your ear to the ground and look ahead, basically. So I can hear the church bells ringing in the background, which means we're right on time today. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. I'd really like to thank you, TJ, Matthew, and Jacob for really interesting insights. We will be having another webinar at the end of January, which is basically sort of extending on this topic, which is more centered around how to transition into a skills-based organization, sort of more tips and advice about how to actually transition into this skills-based work model and build that out across the organization. So keep an eye out for that. You'll get an invitation for that probably in the new year. But one more time, thank you very much, everybody. And yeah, see you next time.